Welcome to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. So this is going to be a straightforward commentary, just my thoughts about what happened on Tuesday night in the election. We certainly didn't see a red wave. And in Illinois, we actually saw, I think, a blue wave. I think we got trounced by the Democrats in the state of Illinois. There's no doubt we did. Here's one indication of that. We only had 45 seats in the Illinois House. We were in a super minority position. And guess what? We lost seats. We lost seats in the Illinois House. Now, whether or not that's going to be a 4-seat loss or a 5-seat loss is still being determined. There is at least one state rep seat here in the western suburbs, Deanne Mazzacki's race, which is up in the air. We have to wait and see what vote by mail says. But literally, you could only have 40 Republicans serving in the Illinois House. That it's never actually been that low in the history of the state. So let's just put this into context. We are being awashed with blue coming in to our state. There's no, and so what's going on? What's going on? This is a state in distress financially. This is a state that has still the worst credit rating out of any other states. This is a state that is now known for its Safety Act, which is the worst criminal reform, quote-unquote Criminal Justice Reform Act, which actually is pro-criminal against and anti-victim. It got national level attention. You've got a crime wave that is as high as it's been in 90 years. You've got school test scores that are just falling through the floor. Let's see what else. Oh, you've got spending that's through the roof, honestly. You've got pension debt that has never been taken care of. You have the second highest property taxes, the second highest gas taxes. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the state of Illinois. Apparently, it's not bad enough. Apparently, it's not bad enough that voters actually wanted to show up in this state and vote their values. Instead, guess what they did? They voted their tribes. They voted their tribes. Now, I mean, I grew up in South Dakota. I think most of my listeners know that. And we never really had a quote-unquote football team, a professional football team, baseball team, basketball team to root for. So, I mean, we kind of grew up being Yankees fans or Kansas City Royals fans, or the Minnesota Twins were very nearby. But, you know, for the most part in this state, and especially in Chicago, you're very tribal about your sports teams. Well, guess what? It appears that you're very tribal about your politics and which political team you are on, because there's no other way to explain why people are voting for the Democrats in the state of Illinois. There's no other way to explain it. So there's going to be a lot of analysis done over the next few months and probably over the next year heading into the 2024 election, which is starting right now, by the way. But I mean, I think we can reflect right now on some of the things that occurred. And what we do know is that abortion actually was an issue that motivated Democrats to come out and vote, because there's no other reason that they would come out and vote. But let's be clear here. There was a lot less participation in this midterm than historically there has ever been. And I'm going to just go through a few of those numbers. I have a friend, he put this together very quickly after the election, and there's far more analysis that will be done. But just overall, you had 400,000 less people vote for J.B. Pritzker in 2022 than voted for him in 2018. Just overall, that's what you had. Looking more specifically for Chicago voter turnout, this is overall turnout. It was down 30%. 30%. Democrat votes were down 30%. GOP votes were down 24%. That's just overall a summary analysis in the governor's race. Looking more specifically, city of Chicago in 2018, they had almost 588,000 votes. And in 2022, about 403,000 votes. So you're down significantly right there, about 185,000 votes down. Suburban Cook in 2018 into 2022, about the same turnout, pretty much about the same turnout. So that's kind of interesting. Let's see here in DuPage specifically, looking at specifically DuPage. This is very interesting. In 2010, the Republicans, more Republicans turned out than Democrats to the tune of about 45,000 votes, 44,869 to be exact. In 2014, 68,666 Republicans turned out in DuPage over the Democrats, more Republicans than Democrats. In 2018, that 68,000 advantage dropped to 4,277. And then in 2022, sure enough, the Democrats exceeded the GOP turnout in DuPage by 46,763 votes. So overall turnout down. In DuPage County, turnout also was down. Total turnout in 2018, 365,000. 2022, 330,000 and change. So overall turnout down, but Democrat turnout up compared to GOP turnout. Democrat turnout exceeded GOP turnout in DuPage. DuPage is the second largest county in the state, which is why it's such an important and key county. And for many of us who grew up and who basically raised our families in DuPage, we've been here for 30 years, moved here in 1992. There's just been a sea change in what you have found politically happening in this county. And it used to be one of the most Republican counties, not just in the state of Illinois, but actually in the entire country. That's no longer true. It's a Democrat blue county. Democrat blue county. Additionally, we lost the county board chairmanship. Greg Hart ran a very good race, engaging race, a well-funded race. He was out there all the time. Deb Conroy, you didn't hear anything from her until a month before election. And then it was basically on the TV. She ran some ads. Saw very few signs out, didn't see her at community events, didn't know that she was going to community events, just a bunch of social media ads and commercials. And she won. She won. And honestly, she's unqualified for that position. To be quite frank with you, I actually served under Deb Conroy, or served with Deb Conroy in the Illinois. She's one of the most partisan people that I know. Lake County. Let's look at Lake County. Lake County is still turning out more Republicans than they are Democrats overall, but the margin of that has dropped precipitously. In 2018, Lake County was plus 15,603 Republican voters. And in 2022, it's just 4,966. So we've got some work to do here. We've basically, the suburbs are turning blue, and the voters aren't turning out, and that's essentially what you saw. You saw about a 55% turnout in the election overall, at least in DuPage. That was the numbers. And it's really reflecting. Let's look at the Illinois 6th congressional, because I think this is also an indicator of what's going on. In 2018, which is a midterm, there were 315,000 voters that showed up in that Illinois 6th district. Now the majority of that district was in DuPage County, but it wrapped into suburban Cook, up into Lake, had a piece of Kane, and a little chunk of McHenry. So you had 315,000 in the midterm in 2018, which, again, was a very contentious midterm. It was right in the middle of President Trump's term, right in the middle of where they wanted to impeach him. You had all this hullabaloo going on. People thought they were going to get screwed over by the tax cuts that he made. They didn't. They actually were very effective when you really look at the data. But still, there was this lot of angst because he capped the SALT deduction and all of that. And so people did turn out. 315,000 turned out to vote. Well, same thing in 2022. I mean, I can't think of a more difficult time that we've had as Americans than the last 2 years. Everything from the national security down to the economy, to a wide open border, gas taxes, you name it, everything. But it's so very contentious. Should have brought out a lot of voters. Well, in the Illinois 6th, only 266,000 voters showed up. A significant drop from 315,000 in 2018, and a huge drop-off from the presidential year of 2020, which was about 393,000 voters. So turnout matters. That's what we know. Turnout matters. And we'll have to wait to get the actual precinct-level information about who showed up, who didn't show up. We only have raw data. And we can only fix that against, how the votes went in particular partisan races, and kind of figure out the makeup of those precincts and who turned out their base and who didn't. So we can kind of make some inferences from that. But we're going to have to look at the raw data and find out who stayed home, who actually stayed home, because some of that can be found when you look at the precinct level, because people will either be registered as a Democrat or registered as a Republican, or they will have voted in Republican primaries, and that gives you an indication that they're a Republican, or they're just an independent and they don't vote in the primaries and you don't know. And so did they show up? Did they show up to vote for midterms? Well, apparently not enough people showed up to vote for the midterms. And to me, that's shocking. I was on WGN. I don't know if you missed it. It was I guess I felt like I got invited to dinner and I ended up being the meal, because it was essentially a 7-on-1 discussion with a bunch of political pundits and reporters who are of one persuasion, the Democrat persuasion, the liberal progressive persuasion, and you had your token rhino there too. And then it was me. And so I felt kind of like I got eaten for lunch. But ahead of that, I had prepared some information just to refresh my mind about what the state of the state was. And again, when I showed up there at 7:15, I showed up. I go into the green room, and I'm looking at the WGN screen, and literally they had already called the governor's race. 0% reporting, already called the governor's race. Now, they ended up being right, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like they should have been calling it at 3 seconds after 7 p.m. based strictly on what they assumed to be voter turnout and the demographics of those districts. It didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. And even amongst the reporters at WGN, there was an uncomfortability with them calling that race that early, but they were following the AP's lead. Now, they ended up being right. They did end up being right, but it was very uncomfortable. But going into that room and being on screen, I felt like, I was going to be in the 8 o'clock hour. I felt like, well, we're going to have a little bit of discussion. It's going to still be a tight race. I actually did think that Bailey had a shot here. I thought that there was so much egregious behavior by the Pritzker administration in terms of taking away people's freedoms during COVID, the mismanagement of COVID funds, a blooming budget, a gloomy budget, a crime out of control, really crime at 30 years highs. And I really felt like, everything, the mama bears would come home against him. There was this whole thing. He's probably will mandate that COVID vaccine for children. Found those leaked emails ahead of time. I just really felt like it was going to be a tighter race, and it wasn't. It wasn't. But in preparation for that, I just wanted to remind people, like, I was following some of the Fox News coverage ahead of it, and on the sidebar, they were doing a lot of issue-based polling. They were showing a lot of issue, like trying to get people in the frame of mind, like how are people feeling ahead of this vote being turned out. And so I captured some of that information. So it said that one of the sidebars was 78% of Americans say the economy is not so good or bad. 78% of Americans. Economy not good? Well, what happened to Rahm Emanuel's, whole mantra? It's the economy, stupid. Apparently it wasn't this year. 73% were concerned about opioids. Well, that's coming across the border. Everybody knows that. 70% wanted to increase police at the border. 70% said that racism is a problem in America. Let's see, only 44% approved of Biden's job performance. Only 38% had a favorable opinion of Kamala. Only 13% that felt that they would be safer on crime under Biden. And Biden was under 50% on China, Russia, climate, the border, jobs, and the economy. Even Bill Clinton at the end of the day came out in the last couple days to say that we need order at the border. Even Bill Clinton. And then ahead of that also, we found out that Guam elected for the first time since 1993 a Republican as their non-voting member of Congress. So it just felt like going into this conversation on WGN that we were going to be pretty successful with all this stuff, these terrible stuff. How is it that anybody would, not make this a referendum on Biden and the agenda, and in Illinois, really on Pritzker, doubling your gas taxes? Isn't that a problem? Well, I guess we misread it all. I got another email from somebody. She's a DC, New York pundit. I'm not going to reveal who. I don't know how widely she wanted this out, but she's very thoughtful. And here's kind of what she had to say about it. She said, the polling data itself, and I think this is really important, the polling data itself did not really predict a red wave when it came to individual races. The GOP pundits and media predicted it based on the importance of key issues with inflation/cost of living and crime scoring so high and Biden's low approval ratings. But the right keeps forgetting that disappointment in Biden and his policies is not the same as being for individual Republican candidates. Good point. At the end of the day, it's always a binary choice on the ballot for the voter. And at the end of the day, the voter tends to like their representative. And so they're making that choice on Biden's a problem. I don't like his policies. I don't believe in student loan bailouts. But, our representative's a nice person. Okay. And they don't connect the dots. And they don't know their own individual representatives' voting habits enough or sufficiently. And you saw this in the commercials that all the Democrats were able to run in the suburbs. You saw the same commercial being repeated, whether it's, Maura Hershauer, Tara Costa Howard, you name it. They all had the same thing. I voted to reduce drug prices. Sounds great. All that was about was capping the cost of insulin. That's what it was about. It was about capping the cost of insulin, one drug. But Republicans didn't respond to that. Republicans didn't take that message on. They got to say that without any context around it. And what I want to say is, okay, you capped the cost of insulin, but let's be clear here. If you're on Medicaid, it's all paid for anyway. If you're on private pay, you're paying your copay and maybe $30 or so a month. $100 tops. That's what you're paying already. So maybe there's a donut hole where people can't afford it, and we can take care of that, and we should take care of them. But they got away with I lowered drug prices. You lower drug prices on one individual drug, and that's your entire thing. Meanwhile, you doubled gas taxes, you raised vehicle fees, you increased your own salary, You're bailing out student loans at the state level. Yes, we are. You passed the largest budgets in the history of the state of Illinois, even though we have out migration and lost population. And by the way, you lowered drug prices, but guess what else you did? You voted to defelonize fentanyl, and there's no discussion about that. So anyway, that individual Democrat sounds like a good person. I'm going to vote for her, not knowing the totality of their votes. Not knowing that they voted for the Safety Act. They, voted against businesses when they voted for Amendment 1 to put it on the ballot. Anyway, then another talking point she brings up is the Democrats and their media sold the red wave scare narrative far in advance of the campaigns, debates, and elections, perhaps as an intentional head fake to turn out their own. I think that's true. They understand the value of driving a constant narrative, and this might have given them some advantage, especially with early voters. Most of them are Democrats. The GOP celebrated and echoed to themselves the red wave narrative of the left, but never sold to non-base voters why a red wave would be a good thing. That's right. We did not sell what you get when you elect us. What do you get when you elect us? Never sold that. I know I spoke to a number of Republicans and said, where's our contract with Illinois? Proud and bold and written and simply defined. We never did that. A second narrative driven by the left since the draft Dobbs decision was leaked, this is back to my this email that I got from somebody who's very informed, was abortion and contraception scare. That misinformation narrative was not only not rebutted, but dismissed and ignored by almost all of the right. Yet, as last night made clear, it clearly mattered in some races that what was considered an enshrined right could be taken away. I am so glad we made it. Well, she's talking about an ad that they did. But she's right about that. They were very good at scaring people that an enshrined right, well, quote unquote enshrined right in the to kill your baby. To kill your baby, let's be blunt, is what drove people to the polls. And we did not have a good rebuttal about it. And this is what very frustrating to me on WGN. It actually didn't come up until the very end of the conversation, more in towards the 10 to 11 o'clock hour. But we had this discussion about abortion. And because they started talking about, well, Republicans are extreme. And I'm like, extreme? No. The Democrats have the most extreme policy agenda in the state of Illinois, bar none. They're extreme when it comes to abortion. First off, they're out of the mainstream. And the Republicans never sold that message. So the majority opinion in Illinois when polled, actually the supermajority opinion in Illinois when polled, does not want late-term abortion, does not want taxpayer-funded abortion, and wants a parent to have the right to know if their minor child's having an abortion. That's the majority opinion. But that is not the opinion of the Democrats. They are the super minority opinion. In some of those cases, they don't even reach 20% approval on that. Most people do not agree with late-term abortion, but that's what they passed. And we never had a response. We let them paint us as extremists when they're the extremists. They're more extreme than France. We're one of 7. Our state is on par with 7 of the worst countries when it comes to abortion rights. 7 of the worst. We might as well be North Korea on this issue, or China. Is that where you want to be? They made it a moral right. Think about that. They made it a moral right to have an abortion. It's your moral right to have an abortion. If we could just get away with the rape incest discussion, what would you say about the 99% other abortions? What would you say? We never got to have that conversation. So most people don't agree that it should be used as a basis for contraception, which is what it is being used for. Okay. The upside, this writer writes, several races the GOP came closer than anyone ever thought, like the New York governor race, though they weren't able to get across the finish line. Also, Republicans will have the House, ending Pelosi's ability to drive awful legislation into the Senate squeaker. So that's good. And it does look like we have the ability to pick up the Senate. We got to win that Laxalt seat. I think right now the tally is 48 Democrats, 49 Republicans, and this goes for the U.S. Senate. If we pick up Laxalt's at 50. If Masters were to get through, or Herschel Walker, we're at 51 or 52. So that's kind of where it stands right now. Here's a couple final thoughts. The impact of early voting and mail-in ballots are 2 areas on our side, the Republican side, that we need to better understand. That is definitely true. We need to use those tools just like the Democrats do. They're very, very good at getting people to do the vote-by-mail process, following up with them, getting those votes in. We need to get better at that. And that is actually another complaint that I received from one of the candidates that I supported. She has a chart of, how her race, she was in a D+. It was only a D+2 race, which means the advantage to Democrats was about 2%, which isn't that much. You can overcome that when you have a terrible voting record on the other side. But again, we got swamped by mail here. But she says, many Republicans insist on voting on Election Day. In my opinion, planning to vote on the last day of the election should be avoided. I would like to invest more effort in encouraging Republicans to consider using vote by mail or early vote. The only way to curb Democrat power is to have Republicans voting in more significant numbers. She is right. We need more voter turnout. I suspect the single-party control has disenfranchised Republicans inside of my district, she writes. Republicans must learn to compete in a vote-by-mail environment. She is right about that. That is definitely true. Need to understand that much better, for sure. Okay. What else do I want to go through? Oh, remarkably, though, and I actually got to give the Chicago Tribune a credit for this because it came to my mind And lo and behold, this today, the Chicago Tribune also wrote about it. Of course, they didn't make it. They didn't title their article correctly. They said Illinois Democrats set to reach a record number of seats in the Illinois House. Ray Long wrote this. Okay, great. But as you read in the article, he said the same thing that I was talking to another friend about. What it should be the headline is Illinois Democrats elect three senators, two senators, one representative who are under federal indictment or investigation. Why is that not the headline? They didn't write that headline. They buried it in this article. But it's in here. But they buried it in here. Why is that? Think about that. Illinois Democrats went to the polls and filled in the block for people who are under federal investigation or indictment. That's what they did. That is what they did. In fact, I wrote a little, here we go. Hold on. I'm going to find this article quick. Oh, yeah. Because there was a lot of talk also among political pundits like, why did the Republicans not do so well? Well, candidate quality matters. Candidate quality matters? And the Democrats put these people under federal investigation and indictment and they get elected? You got to be kidding me. So one of them is State Senator L.G. Sims. He's been approached by federal authorities who are investigating potential influence peddling with the body camera manufacturer. Another one is State Representative Thaddeus Jones. He's under investigation over tax issues involving his campaign funds. Then there's State Senator Emil Jones III. He's actually under federal indictment for he's got federal bribery charges related to the red light camera company SafeSpeed. And then a fourth person, Senator Michael Hastings, is in a very, very tight race with Patrick Sheehan. Sheehan is slightly up, just a couple hundred votes. We don't know what vote by mail will bring. But Hastings, unsealed divorce records, which he tried to hide from the public, his wife in those divorce records flat out accuses him of domestic violence. So, I mean, it's just remarkable. And then, of course, Sims and Jones ran unopposed. Thaddeus actually did have an opponent. But even in Sims and Emil Jones cases, you didn't have to vote for them. They could have just gotten no votes, maybe their own. But no, they won. They won. They won. Federal investigation, federal indictment. And the Democrats put them up too, by the way. Oh yeah, we'll run them on the ballot. Not a problem. No problem. Of course, they shamefully ran Fetterman too, and he won. So, I mean, as bad as it is in Illinois, at least we didn't elect somebody like Fetterman. I will say that. If that's like a shining star, great. That's about the only thing I can come up with. So it's going to be interesting. I wrote this on my Facebook. Illinois still needs a reveille. You can only defy the market for so long, and that received so far 266 comments. I'm like, why are people commenting on this? It's just a simple thing. Basically, a reveille is a wake-up call. If you follow any of my reveilles, you know that a reveille is a wake-up call. It musters the people for a wake-up call. And you can only defy the market for so long. That means that financially speaking, Illinois is in dire straits. You cannot pass legislation like Amendment 1. You cannot continue to have all these high taxes and expect that you're going to be a thriving state. You cannot depend on another COVID bailout from the federal government to bolster your budgets. And that includes your local municipalities to your state level. The money is going to run out. It has run out. And you can't defy this. Everybody left here will pay more. And as they pay more, they're going to get to that breaking point where it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. And a number of people have already made that decision. A number of people. They've already come to that conclusion. And they're going to be leaving. And a number of them have already left, which is why you've had this Halloween out. And you can see it again in the voting numbers. You can see it as Republicans are not at the polls anymore. Why? Maybe they didn't show up because they don't live here anymore. Maybe that's part of the deal. We'll be getting a lot more information about this. I know in my own precinct, I see Republican families leave, Democrat families move in. It's happening everywhere. So that's what's going on. I mean, there was another article I thought was interesting. Here it was. It was the morning. It was the day after the election. Police warn of a string of at least 15 armed robberies, most of them in Humboldt Park. 15 armed robberies, most of them in Humboldt Park. Trib headline. Yep. You know why I found that interesting? Because I now live in the Illinois 3rd Congressional District. And the 3rd Congressional District, the gerrymandered 3rd Congressional District, goes from Wheaton way over to Wayne, up into Elgin and West Chicago, and kind of dips into Bensonville, heads straight west, all the way into Humboldt Park. So the representative now for Congress, Delia Ramirez, she's from Humboldt Park. She lives in Humboldt Park. Oh, here you go. What do we have in common with her? 15 armed robberies in the town she is in. What does she have in common with Wheaton, the horse farms of Wayne, Hispanic region of West Chicago even? What does she have? Nothing. And so it was kind of interesting, too, because, there was this anticipation that even if the state legislature couldn't be flipped, or even if we lost some of these statewide races, surely we'll pick up some congressional seats, because there's a lot of attention on how Congress has performed and a lot of incumbents who went along with all of the spending. All the COVID spending under President Trump and President Biden. All of it. They were in for all of it. The $1 trillion infrastructure bill, the nearly $2 trillion American Recovery Act stuff. They were in for all of it. The Green New Deal stuff that was buried in the infrastructure bill and buried in ARPA. They bought into the whole kit and caboodle. They're the part of the reason that we have the inflation that we have. All of these congressionals. It doesn't matter if it's Lauren Underwood, Jan Schakowsky, Sean Casten, or Nancy Pelosi. Interchangeable widgets when it came to voting. No nuance in their voting whatsoever. None. And so we thought, I think the supposition was that, these districts, and of course the consultancy class was looking at this saying, look, if that district lost by 7 percentage points or less in 2020, which was really one of the worst years for Republicans to run, at least in Illinois, with the headwinds with, COVID and the George Floyd stuff and, Trump off the rails and all that. Okay, one of the worst years to run. Thinking this year would be a great year to run, and the consultancy class's, response to that was, hey, if you lost the district by 7% or more, you know what? That is a winnable district. That's going to go Republican. It didn't happen. It did not happen. And in fact, the most glaring example of this is the 17th Congressional District, which is not a suburban district at all. It doesn't even touch the suburbs. It goes along the western edge of the state in the northwest, reaches into parts of Rockford, which really are very blue. I get that. But then also it picks up like your western Illinois parts too, which is a kind of a college town and all that. So they've got their blue districts. Don't, make no mistake about it. They did a very good job at drawing the maps for the congressional districts in this state. This will continue to be a 3 Republicans to 14 Democrat state for a while, unless people wake the hell up, because they drew these maps very well. But still, they didn't draw them so well that they weren't winnable, or at least the thought was that they were winnable. In some cases, they were maybe a D+5 or a D+4. Those are winnable. In Esther Joy King's race, which she's the Republican challenger to Mr. Sorensen, who I'd never heard of before. It's an open seat. Cherry Bustos abandoned it after the 2020 race. She basically said, I'm not going to run again. So it kind of was Esther's for the taking because she ran in 2020, lost very narrowly to the incumbent DCCC head, Cherry Bustos, lost very narrowly and then she raised a bunch of money again, which is good for her. Plus, at the tail end, I was told that Congressional Leadership Fund on the Republican side gave her an additional $6 million. She couldn't close the deal. In what was arguably an even district and rural and downstate rule. So that was supposed to be sort of an easy pickup. Didn't happen. To his credit, Scott Greider came pretty close to taking out Underwood, but still lost by a few thousand votes. He ran a good race. In the Illinois 6, I think I already covered that, but Keith Pekow, that should have been a win. He lost by 20,000 votes, all of it in DuPage. Interestingly enough, there's a glimmer of hope there. Keith won the Chicago part of that district, broke even in the Cook part of that district, lost in DuPage. Catalina Loft couldn't close the deal with voters either, lost to Bill Foster. And that smug guy in his comments, like people voted for, facts and science. Really, Bill Foster? Really? Ugh. Anyway, so congressionally speaking, Illinois sits at 3 Republicans, 14 Democrats. So a lot of work to be done, a lot of numbers still to look at. I still come back to the place where I was 2 years ago after we lost to Sean Casten. I lost Sean Casten. And I looked at that and I said, but people can't like these policies because they don't work. Their policy prescriptions don't work. And they're lying about all the other contentious issues that maybe drove people to the polls, like abortion. Like, first of all, you don't have a constitutional right for abortion, but guess what? States can make that right. States can make that determination. In the state of Illinois, we have the most extreme abortion laws. They're the extremists, not us. They're the extremists, not us. And people can't understand that issue. They don't really care about women. They don't really care. They really don't care about the sex trafficking of girls who are then taken to abortion clinics and the product of rape and sex trafficking is just simply disposed of and nobody knows better. They don't care for parents to know? Really? Well, we got a lot more to discuss because I don't actually believe that this is what Americans want. They can't want it because they're voting against their own self-interest. When you shut down your energy and you won't have an honest conversation about the actual viability of wind and solar to produce enough energy to make sure that people have heat in the winter. Let me remind you, Germany's figuring it out. Germany's building coal plants where they used to have wind farms. They're building coal plants, and we're shutting down coal here, and we're begging for oil from our adversaries. And we actually need more energy, not less. And wind and solar can't do the job. And you can't have an honest conversation with these people. And you couldn't have it. I could not have that honest conversation on WGN. You only saw what was on air. You should have heard what was happening when they had cut to other segments. They don't want to understand. They only have their talking points. Well, what's going to happen? We're going to have a more divided country because people with common sense, people who have to make decisions for their business and make decisions about their own family and their own family's livelihoods. Oh, and by the way, make a decision about whether or not they want their kids to have an experimental COVID vaccine that has many problems. People are going to vote with their feet, and it's going to get worse in this state. That's what's going to happen. That's the results of the 2022 midterms. Thanks for joining me on this podcast. Appreciate your listening, and invite others to join us too.